Bible Codex, Ancient Discoveries, Modern Revelations.
They searched for decades. Nothing. They dug through ancient ruins. Empty-handed. They analyzed thousands of artifacts. Still no proof. But one broken pottery piece changed everything. Hidden in museum storage for 67 years was the smoking gun. Egyptian military dispatches. Written by the actual army that killed King Josiah. Evidence that proves scripture is historically accurate was sitting right under our noses. And what these ancient clay fragments reveal will blow your mind. James Leslie Starkey never expected to change biblical archaeology forever when he began excavating the ancient fortress of Lachish in 1935. Simply another British scholar hoping to uncover interesting artifacts from Palestine's turbulent past. He discovered instead 21 pieces of broken pottery covered with ancient Hebrew writing that would revolutionize our understanding of Judah's final days. Rather than decorative vessels or ceremonial objects, these were urgent military communications written in Paleo-Hebrew script by desperate soldiers watching their world collapse, known today as the Lachish letters. These pottery fragments contain battlefield intelligence reports sent between Judean military commanders during the final Babylonian siege of 786 before Christ. Letter number 3 mentions Egyptian troop movements and includes a cryptic reference to an unnamed prophet who delivered a single-word warning: beware. Beyond military preparations and communication breakdowns, this correspondence documents the progressive fall of fortified cities throughout the region, creating an intimate portrait of ancient warfare that reads like pages torn from a wartime diary. Megiddo excavations have recently uncovered something equally extraordinary that connects directly to these ancient military dispatches. Israeli archaeologists discovered the largest collection of Egyptian pottery ever found in the southern Levant, dating precisely to the late 7th century before Christ, when Pharaoh Necho launched his northern campaign. Crude, utilitarian vessels belonging to working soldiers replaced typical trade goods or diplomatic gifts, revealing everyday equipment brought during extended military operations. Petrographic analysis confirms these ceramic fragments originated in Egypt's Nile Delta region before transport across hundreds of miles to Megiddo, establishing physical proof of substantial Egyptian military presence, where scripture records King Josiah's final battle. Cooking pot, storage containers, and eating bowls bear unmistakable characteristics of army field equipment rather than luxury items. Egyptian scarab seals and bronze arrowheads discovered in identical layers provide additional evidence of foreign military occupation during this critical period. Bar Ilan University's Professor Aaron Mayer described these findings as providing very nice material evidence of the background of Josiah's untimely demise, while Professor Israel Finkelstein noted that Egyptian ceramics quantity and distribution at Megiddo is unparalleled in the entire region. Far from casual observations by enthusiastic believers, these represent sober academic conclusions from leading secular archaeologists specializing in ancient Near Eastern military history. International political crisis leading to Josiah's death requires understanding complex power struggles reshaping the ancient world during the late 7th century before Christ. Mighty Assyria, regional dominant for centuries, was collapsing under relentless pressure from the rising Babylonian Empire, based in modern Iraq. Seeking to maintain regional influence and prevent complete Babylonian control, Egypt decided to prop up Assyrian resistance by marching a massive army north to the Euphrates River. 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 29 records that Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up to the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates. Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up to the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates. But this brief biblical summary fails to capture the enormous military expedition scale involved. Physical evidence now proves this wasn't a diplomatic mission or small escort force, but a full-scale army requiring extensive logistical support and supply lines stretching across hundreds of miles of hostile territory. Impossible strategic dilemmas faced King Josiah when Egyptian forces entered his territory en route to reinforce Assyria. Allowing Necho's army to pass unchallenged would strengthen Israel's traditional enemy and potentially doom Judah to continued foreign domination. Attacking the Egyptians offered tantalizing possibilities of preventing Assyrian reinforcement, while demonstrating Judean independence, but also meant confronting one of the ancient world's most professional military forces with vastly superior numbers and equipment. Additional details about this fateful decision appear in 2 Chronicles chapter 35, recording that Pharaoh Necho actually sent messengers to Josiah, claiming divine authorization for his mission. God commanded me to make haste. Refrain from meddling with God, who is with me, lest he destroy you. Complex theological scenarios emerge where pagan rulers assert divine backing against righteous kings, who spent entire reigns faithfully serving the Lord. Rather than military miscalculation or political naivety, Josiah's death represented consequences of failing to recognize God's voice through unexpected messengers. Biblical narrative emphasis shows Josiah would not heed the words of Necho from the mouth of God, suggesting the Egyptian pharaoh genuinely spoke divine truth, despite his pagan background, would not heed the words of Necho from the mouth of God. Such theological complexity helps explain why one of Judah's greatest reformer kings died in what appeared an unnecessary battle against overwhelming odds. Sophisticated intelligence networks, operating throughout ancient kingdoms during international crisis, become illuminated through evidence from both Lachish and Megiddo. Judean military commanders maintained constant communication about enemy movements, troop strengths, and defensive preparations across multiple fortified positions, as revealed in the Lachish letters. Hosea, writing from an outpost near Lachish, informs his superior Yosh that he can still observe fire signals from Azekah fortress, implying other communication points have already fallen silent under enemy assault. Organizational capabilities, rivaling modern command structures, emerge from these ancient military dispatches, contradicting outdated scholarly assumptions about primitive biblical period societies. Specific military terminology, classified intelligence protocols, and individual officers mentioned by name and rank create detailed pictures of professional army operations, rather than tribal warfare or guerrilla resistance. Field commanders gathered information about enemy intentions, analyzed strategic options, and coordinated responses across extended geographic areas using communication methods, essentially unchanged until radio invention. Most intriguing intelligence regarding Egyptian military activities in Judean territory appears in letter number 4. Text mentions that Konyehu, son of Alton, commander of the army, has gone down to Egypt. Konyahu, son of Adath, commander of the army, has gone down to Egypt, suggesting ongoing diplomatic or military contacts between Judean officials and Egyptian forces, even as both nations prepared for potential conflict. Such references indicate Josiah's decision to intercept Necho's army wasn't based on incomplete information or hasty judgment, but represented calculated political and military choices made with full knowledge of risks involved. Scholars have puzzled for decades over the unnamed prophet mentioned in letter 3, who delivered the urgent warning, "Beware." Recent analysis suggests this may refer to Uriah. Beware! The same prophet mentioned in Jeremiah chapter 26, who was executed for preaching God's judgment against Jerusalem. If this identification proves correct, the Lachish letters preserve the final prophetic warning delivered before Judah's collapse, creating direct connections between physical evidence and biblical prophecy, spanning both written records and artifacts. Extraordinary circumstances surrounding preservation explain why these particular artifacts survived when countless other ancient documents perished. When Babylonian forces finally overran Lachish in 586 before Christ, they set fire to the fortress, including the guardroom where these pottery fragments were stored. Rather than destroying Hebrew inscriptions, intense heat actually baked the clay tablets like ceramic pottery, making them virtually indestructible and preserving ancient text for future generations to discover and translate. Similar preservation protected Egyptian pottery at Megiddo through 26 centuries of warfare, weather, and neglect until modern analytical techniques could determine precise origins and historical significance. Evidence from two separate locations, surviving independently and now providing corroborating testimony about identical biblical events, suggests intentional preservation rather than mere chance. Profound implications emerge from discovery timing for believers living when biblical authority faces unprecedented challenges from secular academia, popular media, and some religious institutions. Confirmations appear precisely when many Christians need additional encouragement to maintain confidence in Scripture's historical reliability despite cultural pressures accommodating modern skepticism about religious truth claims. Global audiences can now access findings within hours of announcement through digital communication technology, meaning evidence supporting biblical accuracy strengthens faith worldwide faster than ever in human history. Believers scattered across different continents simultaneously access confirmations their ancestors would have waited decades or centuries to receive through traditional publication and distribution channels. Scientific methodology analyzing these artifacts demonstrates rigorous academic investigation supports rather than undermines biblical truth claims. Chemical analysis of clay composition, multispectral imaging of faded inscriptions, and comparative linguistic studies all contribute to comprehensive validation of both authenticity and significance in these ancient discoveries. Modern believers can point to this evidence when engaging skeptics demanding scientific proof for religious assertions. International scope, reflected in physical evidence, mirrors global political situations described in biblical accounts of Josiah's reign. Egyptian pottery manufactured in the Nile Delta and transported to Palestine. Hebrew military dispatches referencing troop movements across multiple nations, and Babylonian destruction layers containing artifacts from various cultures all testify to complex international relationships, shaping ancient Near Eastern history during this pivotal period. Strategic importance of Megiddo as a military stronghold controlling major trade routes explains why both Egyptian and Judean forces considered it worth fighting for despite enormous costs involved. Ancient cities sat at intersections of international highways connecting Egypt and Anatolia, making location control essential for any power seeking regional dominance. Surveys reveal extensive fortifications, supplied, and administrative buildings demonstrating Megiddo's role as a major military and commercial hub throughout antiquity. Prophetic significance extends far beyond historical importance as the site of Josiah's death. Revelation chapter 16, verse 16 identifies this location as Armageddon, where the final great battle between good and evil will occur at the age's end. Continuing emergence of ancient warfare evidence from this prophetically significant site should capture attention of serious Bible students. Recognizing patterns of divine activity throughout history, technological advances promise additional revelations about biblical events as new analytical techniques become available for examining ancient artifacts. Ground-penetrating radar has identified previously unknown structures at both Lachish and Megiddo that may contain additional evidence about the Egyptian campaign and its aftermath. Advanced dating methods, DNA analysis of organic materials, and computer modeling of ancient communication networks all offer potential insights into historical events, confirming rather than contradicting biblical accounts. Human dimensions of ancient conflicts become vivid through personal artifacts left by individual soldiers who participated in the campaign in killing King Josiah. Egyptian amulets bearing protective inscriptions, bronze mirrors used for personal grooming, and gaming pieces for entertainment during long military campaigns provide intimate glimpses into daily lives of men who made history 26 centuries ago. Personal items remind modern believers that biblical events involved real people with hopes, fears, and experiences similar to our own. Revolutionary understanding of ancient Hebrew language development and writing practices during the biblical period emerges from linguistic analysis of the Lachish letters. Consistent vocabulary, grammar, and literary style demonstrated in military dispatches aligns perfectly with the Hebrew texts preserved in Scripture, supporting arguments for careful transmission of biblical manuscripts throughout history. Comparisons of military terminology, administrative procedures, and communication protocols reveal remarkable continuity between physical evidence and biblical descriptions of ancient Israelite society. Broader context surrounding these discoveries includes evidence of widespread destruction throughout Judah during the late 7th and early 6th centuries before Christ. Excavation results from multiple sites show burned layers, broken pottery, and abandoned settlements dating to this period, creating comprehensive pictures of military conflict and social upheaval perfectly matching biblical accounts of invasions, sieges, and deportations marking the southern kingdom's end. Theological implications of Josiah's death require grappling with complex questions about divine sovereignty and human responsibility, continuing to challenge believers today. Scripture presents Josiah as one of Judah's most righteous kings, who did what was right in the sight of the Lord, and turned to the Lord with all his heart, with all his soul, and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses, did what was right in the sight of the Lord. Yet this same righteous king died in battle, because he failed to recognize God's voice, speaking through Pharaoh Necho's warning. Long-term consequences of that fatal decision are preserved in the Lachish letters documenting political and military chaos, engulfing Judah 20 years after Josiah's death. Egyptian victory at Megiddo established foreign control over Judean territory, leading to puppet ruler installation, increased taxation, and eventual Babylonian conquest, fulfilling prophetic warnings about divine judgment for covenant unfaithfulness. Ancient lessons remain relevant for modern believers, who must learn distinguishing between God's voice and human wisdom when making critical decisions. Even righteous leaders can make tragic mistakes when relying on their own understanding rather than seeking divine guidance through proper spiritual channels. As shown in physical evidence, Josiah's death serves as permanent reminder that faithfulness to God requires ongoing spiritual discernment rather than merely following established religious practices. Preservation of both positive and negative examples from biblical history demonstrates God's commitment to providing comprehensive instruction for future generations. Rather than simply recording heroic success stories, Scripture accurately preserves failures of righteous leaders alongside achievements, creating realistic portraits of human struggle with divine will that encourage, rather than discourage contemporary believers facing their own spiritual challenges, as confirmed by these discoveries. Contemporary applications extend beyond academic confirmation of biblical accuracy to practical guidance for Christian living in complex modern circumstances. Faithful soldiers maintaining these relationships, even as their nation collapsed around them, provide examples of integrity under pressure remaining relevant for believers facing personal or societal crisis today, as demonstrated in the Lachish letters. Careful attention to accurate intelligence reporting and professional communication with superiors demonstrates importance of excellence in ordinary responsibilities, even during extraordinary circumstances, as shown by Josiah's example. His defense of his reputation regarding literacy and provision of detailed military updates show how believers can honor God through faithful performance of daily duties, regardless of external trials or uncertainty. Communication networks revealed in ancient military dispatches illustrate how God's people can maintain mutual support and encouragement when facing overwhelming challenges. Signal fires connecting Lachish, Azekah, and other fortified cities represent the kind of spiritual fellowship, sustaining faith communities during periods of persecution or cultural opposition. Inspiration can be drawn from ancient soldiers who continued serving faithfully when victory seemed impossible and defeat appeared inevitable. Their commitment to duty, accuracy in reporting, and mutual support provides models for contemporary Christians who may feel overwhelmed by cultural changes, political upheaval, or personal trials seemingly beyond human ability to resolve. Evangelistic implications extend far beyond strengthening existing believers' faith. Physical evidence confirming biblical historical claims provides powerful tools for engaging skeptics who might dismiss purely religious arguments, but respect scientific research and academic investigation. Combination of inscriptional evidence from Lachish, material evidence from Megiddo, and biblical accounts from Scripture creates comprehensive validation, satisfying rigorous scholarly standards. Honest seekers investigating Christianity's truth claims can examine this evidence using identical analytical methods applied to other ancient historical sources, removing intellectual barriers that might prevent serious consideration of spiritual teachings. Global accessibility of information through digital communication allows believers worldwide to share confirmations with friends, family members, and colleagues struggling with questions about biblical reliability. Professional reports, scholarly articles, and museum exhibitions provide credible sources, supplementing personal testimony and biblical teaching in evangelistic conversations. Timing of revelations during an era of unprecedented challenges to religious authority suggests divine orchestration designed to equip believers with evidence needed for effective witness in secular cultures. As traditional sources of moral and spiritual authority face increasing skepticism, God appears to provide alternative forms of confirmation, speaking to scientifically minded generations, seeking authentic truth amid competing worldviews. Looking toward the future, these discoveries represent just the beginning of what may prove an avalanche of evidence supporting biblical accuracy as new sites are excavated and advanced analytical techniques are applied to existing artifacts. Ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery, and computer modeling continue revealing previously unknown sites throughout the biblical world, promising additional confirmations of Scripture's historical reliability. Young believers entering fields like archaeology, linguistics, ancient history, and Near Eastern studies have unprecedented opportunities to participate in God's ongoing revelation of truth through scientific investigation. Christian scholars working in these disciplines can contribute to growing bodies of evidence-demonstrating faith and reason working together, rather than in opposition. Preservation of ancient evidence across multiple millennia until precisely when technology existed to analyze and understand significance suggests divine timing extending far beyond human planning or prediction. The same God who inspired original biblical authors continues working through modern researchers to confirm accuracy of His Word for contemporary generations, facing unique challenges and opportunities. Remarkable discoveries surrounding King Josiah's death and the Egyptian army that killed him provide undeniable proof that Scripture accurately preserves ancient history, while offering timeless spiritual instruction for believers in every generation. Lachish letters and Megiddo pottery stand as permanent testimony to God's faithfulness in confirming His Word through multiple sources of evidence working together to validate biblical truth claims. Facing an uncertain future filled with cultural upheaval, political instability, and spiritual opposition, these confirmations remind us that our faith rests on the unshakable foundation of God's eternal Word. Divine providence that preserved pottery fragments and military dispatches for 26 centuries continues watching over His people today, providing exactly the encouragement and evidence we need to remain faithful in challenging times. Proof is undeniable, evidence overwhelming, and implications eternal. King Josiah's story, confirmed through discovery, calls every believer to listen carefully for God's voice, trust completely in His Word, and remain faithful to His purposes regardless of external circumstances or apparent impossibilities. Our God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, working through human history to accomplish his eternal plan while preserving his truth for all who will believe.